Hello and welcome again to my channel. So one thing that you might have noticed if you followed my channel for quite a while now, in the month of January I did not do any bookish avec moi videos, and that's because I guess I just wasn't really in a situation where I was able to do a lot of videos. So I think I only did like 3 videos that month. Yeah, only 3 videos, and I hope that the coming month I'll be able to make more. But in any case, it's already a new month, February. I really love February. It's the month of Valentine's Day. It's really interesting. So Valentine's Day it has a new importance to me. So maybe I'll talk about that later. But anyway, in this video, I just kind of want to talk about some of the books that I finished. Not some of the books, all of the books that I finished in the month of January. So here's a quick rundown as to the books that I have read and what I thought about them. And yeah, let's start with the first one, which was Bonjour, Tristesse by Françoise Sagan. This book was originally in French, was published in 1954, I think, translated into English by Irene, and this book was gifted to me by my sister. I made a video about this one, where in which I basically talked about why I disliked this book. So yeah, I totally started 2021 with a book that I disliked. But in any case, I still appreciate this book. I think that the cover looks really lovely, and I've always been wanting to read this book for a long time now. So, yay for, finally being able to read this. Basically, Bonjour, Tristesse is about this teenage girl who lives with her father, and they live on French Riviera in the 1950s, and they are like sunbathing all day, partying all night. They're living the kind of lifestyle where they don't have to think about work or study or stuff, effort in their life. So it's all hedonism. And then one day this father wants to get married with a woman who is a little bit more, somewhat represents a different lifestyle that they lead. And this teenage girl, her name is Cecile, she's so worried about having the prospect of her life of hedonism is going to be ruined by this woman in their household. And so she plans to separate her father from this woman, but then a tragedy occurs. Now, what I don't really like about this book is that, well, I'm totally fine with characters who live a life that are full of privilege and luxury and fun and all that. It's totally fine. But what I don't like is how the main character, this Cecile, who is just a teenager, younger than 20 years old, she is living this life. And I just find myself really difficult to connect with her. She keeps philosophizing on how the kinds of suffering, I don't know, the kinds of difficulties that she's facing in her life, and that's like my mind just can't compute. So Bonjour Tristesse, that's Bonjour Tristesse for y'all. And then next one, I gave this one 1 star, but I gave this one 5 star because this book was just awesome. Okay, this is the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. I actually started reading this book, I think it was in November 2020, and I just adored it so much. First of all, I thought that the title was interesting. I really love how this title just is so vague. And it's kind of like suggesting something that is it feels unexpected, but this story is just so compelling. It's about this American family who has to move to Belgian Congo. And so the story sets in the 1960s, around the time when Congo is gaining independence from the Belgians. And so you have this family, the Price family, moving to Belgian Congo, essentially because the father of that family, his name is Nathan Price, he's a missionary, and he wants to kind of start a church, I think lead the church in a village called Kilanga in Congo. But the thing is, the rest of the family, they don't really want to go to Congo. I mean, because, you know, they have to like leave the place where they feel comfortable in, and they have to live in a totally new place. They are not really on board with that idea, but then they just tag along because the father is just a big dickhead. He's a very abusive person, as we see later on in this book. But basically, this book is about this dysfunctional family who has to live in a totally new place, surrounded by total uncertainty. And it shows how this family just kind of changes with all the events that are occurring around them, particularly when the country where they are in, the Congo, is fighting for independence, and there's a lot of social and political instability. This is a very compelling book because this one is a domestic fiction through and through. I really love domestic fiction. It also has this really strong historical fiction feel to it. But then the way that it tackles historical fiction, especially when it comes to the politics and the social climate of the Congo at the time, it tells it in such a way that it feels like another part of domestic fiction. There is this element of domesticity to it, elements of personal life. There's this way how it relates to this one tiny family, American family, who lives in the Congo. And I just love it so much. This book is a tragedy, so you don't really expect something happy at the end of this book, but then I just thought that this book, the way that the writing is done, is just full of compassion. And it talks about religion, talks about class differences, colonialism, racism, all of those nasty stuff. But it talks about all of those stuff in such a compassionate way, which is why I just find this book so beautiful. I think you'll see my angle change a little bit. So moving on to the third book that I finished, and this one was a buddy read with Shannon from That's a Poe. This is Jiyoung Born 1982, written by Nam-Joo and translated from Korean into English by Jamie Chang. This is a very slim book, and I like this book, but then that's not how I felt about it when I started reading this book. So essentially, this book is about this woman named Jiyoung, and her life, starting when she's a young girl, all the way until she's an adult, married adult, and how she has to kind of navigate her life at these different stages, since she's a child, when she's a teenager, and then she's a young adult at college, and then looking for jobs, and then as an adult going to the life of marriage, and how she has to kind of deal with so many different kinds of misogyny and just pretty much inequality, mistreatment towards women in her society. And I think that this book is very compelling. It's very fast-paced. It takes you through all of these different kinds of episodes where this character, Jiyoung, has to face so many different kinds of discrimination and different levels of oppression as a female individual in her society. I just thought that it's really compelling. You see all of those scenes like back to back, and it's moving really quick in this book. When I first started reading this book, I found that the tone was somewhat different. There is this very, like I would say, incredibly dispassionate tone in which this book is being, how this book is being narrated. But over time, as I read more into this book, I thought that the tone was actually something that worked in favor of this book. So there's this tone that kind of become more and more reminiscent of a narration in a documentary. So essentially this book felt kind of like a short documentary for me. And there's this way of how this book is kind of like blurring the lines of fiction and non-fiction. It has plenty of moments where it would actually come up with different citations. It will have footnotes, and it will come up with different facts regarding how women are treated in Korean societies. And so it does have that kind of non-fiction feel to it. And so overall, there's this so much elements that makes this book feel kind of metafictional, and I like it. At the end of this book, I thought that the tone, the writing style, it felt like a deliberate choice. It did not feel really like it did not feel like a failure. Instead, it felt like something that was done on purpose, and I thought that it was kind of effective at the end. So yeah, I loved this book. I gave it 5 stars as well. So I also read, or more like listened to, an audiobook. I listened to 2 audiobooks, but the one that I finished after Kim Ji-young was Tomasz Jedrowski's Swimming in the Dark. So Swimming in the Dark is a kind of like a coming-of-age novel / gay literature about this guy who grows up as a boy in communist Poland. And at that time, there was a lot of suppression going on, a lot of political and social instability. People are kind of like living in fear because, they can always be kind of like reported to the authorities and all that, and, get arrested and stuff like that. And so there was a lot of kind of like this sense of stake in that book. And then you have this main character. His name is Ludwig. He's a gay person. And at the beginning of this book, we see how he kind of discovers his sexuality and how he slowly just kind of comes to terms to that. And then we also get to see how his sexuality evolves and develops and how he gets into a relationship. So this book is essentially a story about self-discovery amidst the environment where this particular self-discovery could be something that is quite dangerous. And so throughout this book, there's this lingering sense of suspense or danger, whether Ludwig is going to be able to live his life and hide that part of him in order to avoid getting arrested and punished for that. But there was something about this book that just didn't really click with me. Like, there's this sense of stake, but then the payoff was just not so strong, I think. There was like this really long build up on how scary the society is for a person like Ludwig. And how, just a small misstep, he could, bad things could happen to him. But it just didn't happen like that, and I just didn't feel like Ludwig is, I don't know, I just don't feel that this main character is suffering enough in this book, and so as a result it didn't feel very compelling. Most of the times when I read books, my favorite books tend to have characters where they are suffering so much, something really awful happening to them, and it feels like their world is crumbling down on them. But that does not really happen in this book. We get the sense that there is danger, and we get the sense that there's, this fear in the air, but nothing bad really happens to him, I think. So yeah, I wasn't really satisfied with this book. I gave it 3 stars. And then the next book I finished was an interesting one. This one is called Pages from the Pizza Crows. So this one is a short story collection. Let me see. Scritto e perpetuato da Witmer. Evan Witmer, the writer of this book. So this one is interesting because this book is a independently published book, and the other day, the writer, he approached me on Instagram and just asked me if I was interested in reading his book, and then gave a review for it. And I was like, okay, that was the first time someone asked me to review their books, and it was interesting. No one has ever done that before. Viewers, I said yes. So I just thought that the book was kind of interesting. I saw the Goodreads page and some of the synopsis of the book. The title was interesting, and the concept was also kind of interesting. So basically, this is a short story collection, but there is also this interstitial narrative that is going on between each of the stories. So the premise of the interstitial story is kind of like this, where you have this main character who is approached by a crow. Now this crow is the main protagonist of this narrative. He would feed the crows with kind of pizza. And so for a certain type of pizza that he's giving this crow would come back and return with a story that would become like one of the short stories in here. And with different flavors, different types of pizza, this crow would return with a different sort of stories. If the protagonist gives this crow the same type of pizza, the crow will come back with the same story. Well, at least that's how it goes in here. And so all of these different stories are technically being brought by the crow according to what kind of pizza the crow receives. So I think that's really interesting. It has that really nice metafictional slant to it, which I really loved. The stories in this book, they are mostly of science fiction, urban fantasy sort of stories. One story that I really love is this first story, actually, where you have these two characters. If they fall asleep at the same time, if they fall asleep at different places at the same time, then they would end up being teleported and become together at the same place, at the place where the first person fell asleep in. So they cannot fall asleep at the same time. And it became more complicated because these two people, they broke up. And so they really don't want to see each other. But they just can't help it if they fall asleep at the same time. The first person's place will become the place where the two persons end up in. So it's really interesting. I really like that story. Overall, the stories are interesting, but there is something about the tone which I find a little bit inconsistent. There is this really dark irony, black humor going on in it, but somehow there are bits and chunks inside each of the stories where the tone just felt a little bit different. So it felt maybe a little bit too bright when the story is a bit dark. But overall, I thought it was an okay short story book. If you are into kind of urban fantasy, black humor kind of story, cosmic fantasy, cosmic horror-ish kind of books, then you can check this one out. It's not bad, but I think maybe the genre is not really up to my taste right now. But overall, I thought it was a nicely written book. Next book is the second audiobook that I finished in January, and that is The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo, narrated by Elizabeth Acevedo herself. This would be the second Elizabeth Acevedo book that I finished. The first one was Clap When You Land, which I read last year, and I thought that was great. This book is also great. It's a YA fiction. It's a novel written in verse. I just thought that the whole story is just it has so much heart in it. it's just a lovely book, a really pleasant book to listen to on a nice sunny Sunday afternoon. So basically this book is about this young girl named Xiomara Batista, and she has a twin, and she has her parents. Basically, her mom is quite traditional, she's very religious, and she prefers Xiomara to grow up as a girl in a very conservative way, religious, going to church, and just be, the so-called good girl. While at the same time, the mom is also strongly favors the twin, Xiomara's twin, who is a boy. Rather smart boy, very intelligent, who does really well in school and all that. And Xiomara just feels kind of left out. She does not feel like she's loved as much as the twin. And so many things that she wants to do, she can't do because she's a girl, and therefore she will be punished if she ever does things like dating or kissing a boy, which happens in this book. And at the same time, Xiomara, she is also not as academically inclined as her twin. And she has this aspiration where she really wants to voice out what she has inside her. And so she finds this outlet in becoming a poet. So this book is essentially a story as to how Xiomara kind of finds that particular outlet, that artistic outlet, where she can actually voice out all of her frustration, whatever that she's feeling inside about her family, her life. I just thought that this book is it's really well written, and there's this heartwarming element to it, and at the same time you can also feel whenever things are going to turn bad, you feel that there's a strong sense of stake in this book. So overall I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, it's lovely. It's a lovely book. The next book that I finished was Elena Ferrante's Those Who Live and Those Who Stay, originally written in Italian, and this book was translated also by Anne Goldstein, the same translator for My Brilliant Friend, and also, what's the second book called? You know what? I can't remember. But anyway, this is the 3rd book in the Neapolitan novels. Basically, the Neapolitan novels is kind of like a 4-book series where you would see this adventure, not exactly adventure, but more like this the story, coming of age story of 2 girls, Elena and Lila, who grow up in 1960s Naples, a poor neighborhood in Naples. And so they have to kind of grow up in an environment that was kind of harsh and violent. And these 2 girls are really smart. My Brilliant Friend saw these 2 girls as girls, so we see them their stories as little girls. The second book, whose titles I actually forgot, see these girls as kind of a teenager and young adults, and over here we see these girls as kind of adult, already married with children and all that. And we see even more how these girls are really wanting to break out of their traditional gender roles, break out of their neighborhood, and just be who they want to be. But at the same time, there are things holding them back, like the fact that they are women and their family back in their neighborhood and their friends, people around them. Basically, so many crazy drama going on about these 2 girls, these really smart, intelligent girls. So yeah, I really love this one as well. But just a bit of comment about this book, because it's the 3rd book in this whole series. It's also kind of like the middle of a story. And usually in the middle you see most of the frustration going on, where the characters are doing stupid things to themselves and you're kind of like pulling your hair because the characters are like really dumb at that point. This is the book where the characters are really dumb. the main character, Elena, this book I think focuses more on Elena, the nice girl. She does a lot of stupid stuff in this one. So, and then, I think maybe all of those stupid stuff that she's gonna do, it all going to bite her back in the ass in the fourth book, I think. But in this book, she is still in the middle of doing stupid things, and so I think that part was a little bit frustrating for me as a reader, and I don't get any resolution for that yet in this book. So yeah, I think that was my only I wouldn't say complaint, because that's how stories work. But yeah, this book is filled with frustration, filled with characters doing silly, dumb stuff. And, but overall it's a nice book. I gave it 4 stars. 4 because of, characters being dumb. But yeah, I think that's good enough. 4. And finally, I finished this book in January. I think I finished it a few days ago. Alice Smith's Winter. This is the second book in the Seasonal Quartet series, which consists of 4 books. The first book was Autumn, which I loved. And this book, I also love. In fact, I think I love this one more than Autumn. Autumn I gave 4 stars. This one I gave 5 stars. So yeah, Alice Smith's Winter, just like Autumn, is kind of like a mix of things thrown in. It's like you have this basket of so many different kinds of things that may look unrelated to one another, but there is a coherent theme going on, but you just don't really know how to describe it. I mean, I don't really know how to describe it yet, right now, at this point, because I don't feel smart enough to describe them yet. Hopefully. So, yeah, Winter is a really pleasant book, mainly because it has this really strong Christmassy vibe to it. I mean, the story kind of takes place around Christmas. There's this main plot going on in Winter where we see this family lunch gathering where we have the mom, Sophia, and we also have this her sister named Iris. Now, Sophia is a rather conservative woman in the UK, and yeah, she has conservative views and all that. She feels kind of rigid in this book, not someone who is very communicative with her family members and other people in general. And we also have, Iris, who is an activist, very kind of like socially conscious kind of a person. So she's kind of like totally different than who Sophia is. They're kind of like opposite to one another. Now, Sophia has a son. His name is Arthur. He is a nature blogger, but then again, he usually just writes stuff, without really experiencing the nature itself. So, for the most part, the stuff that he writes are kind of lies of sorts. And Arthur just broke up with his girlfriend, and so he wants to bring, a girlfriend home. So he pays another person named Lux, who is a Croatian, and so Lux is someone that he pays in order to pose as his girlfriend at the Christmas lunch. And essentially, Arthur, Sophia, and Iris, they are not really like communicative with one another. They are not one big happy family, but with the presence of Lux, there's something happening to that family dynamics, which is, I don't know, it feels like a Hallmark movie of sorts, So yeah, I really like that vibe in this book. It feels like a nice Christmas story, and I had to finish this in January. I think it would have been better if I read this in Christmas, but then again, this was an awesome book regardless. When I read it, I gave this one 5 stars. Lovely, lovely stuff. So that's it. Another thing that you might have noticed is that I finished about 8 books this month, which is a lot. Yeah, one of those things that kind of make me question if Sluggish Reader is the right name for my channel. which I think it is. You know, I think that in February and March, the number of books I'm going to read is going to be lower. But yeah, I think, again, 2 of these books were audiobooks. 2 of them I started reading in 2020, and I just so happened to finish in 2021. And 3 of them are, read along, group read. So there's definitely that time constraint element to it. But in any case, 8 books, that's a great start to this year. I noticed that many people in BookTube, they are having this goal where they want to read less books and feel, be a bit more, to appreciate their books more, read the books more slowly. And I feel kind of different in the sense that my goal is trying to read more books than last year. So, yeah, I guess, different things work for different people. But anyway, that's it for all the books I finished in January 2021. My first video in February 2021. And I'll see you again in a different video. So until then, take care. Thanks for watching. And bye-bye.